Hello and welcome to this lesson. In this lesson we will learn about Cisco CLI. So any software, any operating system can be managed with one of those two styles. Can be managed with GUI, which stands for Graphical User Interface, or can be managed with CLI, with Command Line Interface. So some softwares support only GUI and some other softwares support only CLI, and there is softwares that support GUI and CLI. Example of GUI softwares is Microsoft Word. Microsoft Word use a GUI or friendly interface. So inside Microsoft Word there is some buttons, there is some shapes, you can drag and drop something. There is also the CLI. Example of CLI is Linux shell. Also, if you are using Windows, you can search for CMD, which is command prompt. Command prompt is a software exists in the Windows, and this software supports the CLI, which is the command line interface. So when you open this software, you will see a black screen and you can use only your keyboard in order to type commands. So this software is a CLI based. Cisco uses a specific OS or operating system called ISO or internetworking operating system. This operating system is a CLI based. So when we configure, manage our switch, we will use only the CLI. So we have to type commands in order to configure our device. Same thing also with the router. For Cisco switches in general, there is Meraki switches, there is Nexus switches, and there is Catalyst switches. CCNA focus only on the Catalyst switch, so we will learn about the Catalyst switch and how we configure it. The Catalyst switch uses the ISO or internetworking operating system. When we purchase a switch, the switch comes with a specific port called console port. Some people also call it management port, and this port used to manage and configure our switch. So by default, when we purchase a new switch with the factory setting, we will see a console port in our switch. This port will allow us to access the CLI, the command line interface for our switch, in order to be able to configure it and manage it. The console port can be RJ45 console port, same as here, or it can be mini B console port. The old switches support only the RJ45 console port, but currently we can use the RJ45 console port, or we can use the mini B console port. Also for the regular data, our regular data ports, those ports goes in a specific order. As you can see in our example here, the ports will go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. For these big switches, Cisco will not continue in the order. So this port will not be 13, 14. Instead, Cisco will use the module. For example, port 12, we can see it 1/0/12, or it could be 1/12. 1 refer to the module or the blade number, and 12 refer to the port number. Same thing will happen here. So this is module 1 or blade 1, module 2 or blade 2, module 3 or blade 3. So the first port here will be 2/0/1 or 2/1 until port 2/0/48 or 248. Then when we go to module 3 or blade 3, this port will be 3/0/1 or 3/1 up to 3/0/48 or 3/48. For console cable, we have more than one type of console cable. We have the RJ45 to USB console cable. In case of we are using that type of cable, we will connect the RJ45 side to our switch and the USB to our desktop or laptop. We have also the mini P to USB console cable. In case of using that cable, we will connect the mini P USB side to our switch and the regular USB, which is USB type A, to our desktop or laptop. We have also the serial to RJ45 cable. This cable is always blue and we can call it also rollover. We call it rollover because the pinouts on one end are reversed on the other end. So when we spoke about the 10 base and 100 base, we said that there is a straight through and the crossover cables, right? For the serial is rollover cable. So we have pin 1 connected to pin 8, 2 to 7, 3 to 6, 4 to 5, 5 to 4, 6 to 3, 7 to 2, and pin 8 to 1. Most of the old computer and laptops used to support the serial cable, but right now they don't support the serial cable. So in case of that, we will need a USB converter. So in case of we are using the serial to RJ45, we will need the USB converter, and in that case, we will connect the RJ45 to our console port in our switch and use the converter and connect the USB to our desktop or laptop. To manage our switch using the console cable, we have to be physically on the same site where is our switch at. So what about if we have more than one branch and each single branch located in a different state? In that case, configuring our switch using a console cable will not be appropriate. For that reason, we can use a protocol called Telnet or another protocol called SSH. Those two protocols will allow us to access our switch remotely. We don't have to be physically on the same site or same location where is our switch at. To use the Telnet and SSH, we need to have a connectivity between our switch and our desktop or laptop. So we can use, for example, the internet. We can connect our switch to the internet and have our desktop connected to the internet also. In that case, we can enable the Telnet or SSH in our switch. And to access our switch using the Telnet or SSH, we can use the regular data ports. We don't have to connect our device with a serial cable or any other specific cable. So we can use our desktop in order to access to our switch remotely. We don't have to be on the same location where our switch at. Cisco routers and switches use a specific memories to store files. The first type of memory we will talk about is RAM, which is random access memory. This type of memory saved something called running configuration. We have also the flash memory. The flash memory saving the ISO image, which is our operating system image. We have also something called ROM or read-only memory. In this memory, Cisco store a specific software called Bootstrap or Boot Helper. We have also a memory called NVRAM or non-volatile RAM. This memory used to store something called startup configuration. So what is the running configuration and what is the startup configuration? So when we purchase our switch and we start to configure our switch, so after we, let's say, enable one of the interfaces, configure one of the interfaces, after we doing that, our configuration will be saved in something called running configuration. If we reload our switch or disconnect the power, the running configuration will be erased. If we don't want this to happen, we can move our configuration to something called startup configuration. If we moved our configuration to the startup configuration, if we reload or disconnect the power to our switch, we will still have our configuration saved on our switch. To do that, we have to first open our switch, start to do some configuration, and then we can do one of those two commands. So after we enable one of the interfaces, for example, after we configure our console cable, we can do the command copy running config or copy running configuration startup configuration, or we can do write. This will move our configuration from the running configuration to the startup configuration, and we will not lose our configuration if we disconnect the power or reload our switch. We can also delete the startup configuration. So if we delete our startup configuration, we will kind of resetting our switch to the factory setting. We can do that with one of those two commands, write erase or erase startup configuration. To understand more how our switch will work, let's take a look at what will happen when we power up our switch. So when we power our switch, first thing will happen is something called boost, power on self test. In that process, our switch will do a test on itself. It will start to test the hardware component in order to make sure that all those components works properly. So our switch will run, for example, the CPU at the highest capacity. It will run the power supply fans at the high capacity. It will check the RAM memory, the hardware, all the component in order to make sure that there is no issue or no problem with any of the physical components. The next step, our switch will run the bootstrap or boot helper software. Bootstrap is a small program that executes a larger program. So the bootstrap program will be responsible to execute our operating system. The operating system is located at the flash. We can also configure our switch to get the operating system image, the ISO image, from a remote server using TFTP. TFTP protocol is a protocol allow us to transfer files over the internet or over the network. After that, our switch will locate the startup configuration from the NVRAM. If there is a configuration on the NVRAM, our switch will load the startup configuration. If not, we will be prompted to do an initial configuration dialog. For Cisco CLI, Cisco use more than one modes in the CLI. We have the user exec mode, we have privilege exec or enable mode, we have global configuration mode, we have sub configuration mode. Cisco using those modes in order to add a layer of security for accessing the network equipment. When we first log into our device using Telnet, SSH or a console cable, we will be in the user exec mode. We can do one command to move to the enable mode. We can do another command to move from the enable mode to the configuration mode. And from the configuration mode, we can access the sub configuration mode. Those are examples of the sub configuration modes, but we have more than those modes. So first, what we can do in one of those modes. In user exec mode, we can do a very limited show commands, which will help us to see some configuration and to see some settings in our device. For enable mode allow us to see all the configuration, check our system, and also we can do a very limited configuration in our device. Then we have the global configuration mode or the configuration mode. Inside the configuration mode, we can do some configuration that will affect all of our switch. From the configuration mode, we can move to one of the sub configuration modes. So we can go to the interface fast Ethernet 0/1 sub configuration mode. When we access that mode, we can do a configuration related only to FA 0/1, fast Ethernet 0/1. For example, we can shut down this interface. We can change something called switch port. We can turn off automedics. We can also log into the console sub configuration mode. So if we are in the global configuration mode and we type the command line console 0, This will take us to the console port configuration. We can do some of those configuration inside the line console. We can also access the line VTY 0/4, which will allow us to configure the SSH. And as you can see here, those commands are similar to the commands in line VTY. So as you can see here, the CLI modes will allow us to separate the configuration portion for our switch. Also, the CLI modes will add a layer of security to our device. What we mean by that? Let's imagine that we have a company, and inside that company we have Bob, we have Jack, and we have Chris. So Bob is a new network engineer that he just joined our team, and he don't have that much experience in Cisco devices. For that case, we can allow Bob just to access the user exit mode. So he can go around, check some configuration, but not all the configuration, and he cannot do any configuration to our device. We have also Jack. Jack been with us for a long time, but he don't know how to do the configuration for our devices. For that case, we can give Jack access to the enable mode. He can see any configuration he wish to see. He can monitor the system, and he can do very limited configuration to our devices. But he cannot do any major configuration to our devices. And we have also Chris. Chris is a senior network engineer, and he's expert in Cisco devices. So we can give Chris access to all the modes in order to be able to configure anything in our devices. Let's see how is the modes will looks like. So first, as we mentioned before, when we logged in, we will be in the user exit mode. And in this mode, we will see the host name. And the host name is the name of our switch. We can name it whatever we want. We can name it switch 1, SW1, whatever we want. And next to our host name, we will see this sign. If we wish to move from the user exit mode to the privilege mode or enable mode, we can do the command enable. Enable will take us to the privilege exit mode. From exit mode, as you can see here, we have our host name, and next to our host name, there is a bound. This is how the privilege exit or enable mode looks like. If we wanted to move to the global configuration from the enable mode, we can do the command configure terminal. Configure terminal will move us from the privilege exit mode to the global configuration mode. Here we will see our host name and the word config between parentheses, and we have here the bound sign. If we wish to move to one of the sub configuration modes, we can do the command, for example, line console 0. This command will take us to the console configuration mode. As you can see here, we have host name, then config -line. So here we will find a short description of the sub configuration mode that we are in. So how can we exit those modes if we are in the console mode and we need to go to the user exit mode? We can simply use the exit command. So if we type exit, it will get us from the console to the configuration. Then we can do another exit. Another exit will take us to the enable mode. If we did another exit command, this will take us to the user exit mode. Also, we can do in any of those modes end. We can do the command end, or we can simply press Ctrl+Z. This will take us from any mode to the enable mode. Those are some examples of the configuration or commands that we can do in each one of those modes. So here we can do in the user exit mode, we can do exit, logout, ping, terminal, traceroute. In the enable mode, the most important command we will see, which is show. In the configuration mode, we can do one of those commands. And if you notice here, we have the word enable. And we said that enable will take us from the user exit mode to the enable mode, right? Here you have to be very careful where you do your commands, because enable here will do a different thing than taking you from user exit mode to the enable mode. Enable here will allow you to put enable password. Here also some configurations that we can do with the console mode or the line VTY for SSH and the Telnet. This is the end for this video. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.